Greetings! Today we embark on a fascinating journey on the topic of food in the Bible. We will explore what people ate in biblical times, the role food played in their lives, what prohibitions existed, and what interesting facts are hidden in the sacred texts. Food in the Bible is not just about nutrition. It's about connection with God, culture, and even spiritual lessons. Why is this topic so important? Because food has always been more significant than mere sustenance. It reflected the faith, customs, and living conditions of people thousands of years ago. Imagine bread baked in the desert, water turned into wine at a wedding, or manna falling from the sky. All of this is part of a grand story. In the next half hour, we will look into the recipes mentioned in the Bible, from matzah to lentil pottage, find out why some foods were forbidden, and uncover the symbolism of items like bread and wine at the Last Supper. We also have amazing facts awaiting us. For example, how food could become a trial or a miracle. So make yourselves comfortable, and let's begin this tasty and informative journey together. When we open the first book of the Bible, Genesis, we see how God cares for human nutrition from the very beginning. Genesis 1:29 says, "And God said, 'Behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is on the face of all the earth, and every tree with seed in its fruit. You shall have them for food.'" This is a stunning moment, because food is presented here not just as a necessity, but as a gift, a blessing from the Creator. God did not leave humanity hungry. He gave them everything needed for life: plants, fruits, and later, after the flood, the meat of animals. This shows that food in the biblical context is not just fuel for the body, but a sign of God's love and care. Even in difficult times, like in the desert, God sent manna from heaven to sustain His people. Food becomes a connecting link between God and humanity, a symbol of His mercy. Now let's look at what people ate daily in biblical times. The basis of their diet consisted of simple but nutritious foods: bread, wine, olive oil, dates, lentils, and occasionally fish or meat. Bread was literally the staff of life. Baked from barley or wheat, it was so important that Jesus called Himself the bread of life in the Gospel of John 6:35. Wine was drunk almost daily, diluted with water. It was not just a beverage, but part of the culture and even a necessity, as clean water was not always available. Olive oil was used for cooking, lighting, and even as medicine. Lentils, dates, and figs added variety, and fish was especially popular among those living near the Sea of Galilee. It was simple food, accessible to most, reflecting the harsh living conditions where people depended on the land and the harvest. But food in the Bible is not just about survival. It is full of symbols. Take the Last Supper, mentioned in Matthew 26:26-28. Jesus takes bread and wine and says, "This is my body. This is my blood." These simple foods become symbols of sacrifice and salvation, and to this day, Christians worldwide repeat this ritual in communion, or the Eucharist, or recall the lamb from the book of Exodus, chapter 12. During the first Passover, the Hebrews slaughtered lambs and marked their doorposts with the blood to be saved from the angel of death. The roasted meat of the lamb was eaten with bitter herbs and unleavened bread. It was a meal that reminded them of freedom and God's salvation. Food in the Bible often carries deep meaning, linking the physical and the spiritual, the everyday and the eternal. Let's start with one of the most famous biblical dishes: unleavened bread, or matzah. This recipe originates from the book of Exodus, chapter 12, verse 15, where God commands the Hebrews to celebrate the feast of unleavened bread in memory of the exodus from Egypt. It says, "7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. On the first day you shall remove leaven out of your houses." Why unleavened? Because fleeing from Pharaoh, the people did not have time to let the dough rise. They baked flatbreads in haste. The recipe is incredibly simple. Take flour, water, and a little salt. Knead the dough, roll it into thin flatbreads, and bake on a hot surface or in an oven. No yeast, no long waiting. It's food that can be prepared quickly. Matzah has a neutral, slightly crispy taste, and it goes well with honey or olive oil. Today, it's easy to make at home. Mix a cup of flour with half a cup of water, add a pinch of salt, roll it out, and cook on a dry skillet for a couple of minutes on each side. It's not just food, but also a reminder of freedom and God's protection. Next, we have lentil pottage, a dish mentioned in Genesis 25:29-34. It tells how Esau, tired after hunting, sold his birthright to his brother Jacob for a bowl of this pottage. The text says, "And Jacob cooked a stew, and Esau said, 'Let me eat some of that red stuff.'" That red stuff. The red stuff is most likely red lentils, popular in the Middle East at that time. The recipe isn't specified in the Bible, but we can imagine it. Take red lentils, cook them with onion, garlic, and spices, like cumin and coriander, which were known in the region. The result is a thick, hearty pottage with an earthy taste and aroma. For a modern version, you can take 200 grams of red lentils, an onion, a couple of garlic cloves, sauté them in olive oil, add spices, and cook with water for about half an hour. It's a simple dish, but it shows how food could be fateful. Esau literally gave away his future for a bowl of soup. Interestingly, lentils were one of the first crops humans began to cultivate, so it's also a piece of ancient history. And finally, roasted fish with honey, a dish we see in the Gospel of Luke 24:42-43. After the resurrection, Jesus appeared to his disciples, and to prove he was not a ghost, asked for food. They gave him a piece of roasted fish and honeycomb, and he ate it in their presence. This is an amazing moment that shows Jesus' human nature even after the miracle of resurrection. In those times, fish was common food for the inhabitants of Galilee. For example, tilapia or sardines were caught in the Sea of Galilee, Lake Kinneret. The recipe is simple. The fish was cleaned, salted, and roasted over coals, or fried in a pan with olive oil until crispy. Honey was added as a sweet contrast. They might dip the fish in it or drizzle it over the top. At home, you can take a fish fillet, fry it in oil for a couple of minutes on each side, and then serve it with a spoonful of honey. The taste is unusual. The salty fish and sweet honey combine beautifully. This dish speaks to the availability of products in biblical times. Fish was cheap and common, and honey was gathered from wild hives. Moreover, honey in the Bible often symbolizes abundance, as in the description of the Promised Land, a land flowing with milk and honey. So, it's not just food, but history and symbol in one. Let's move on to the dietary rules found in the Bible, starting with the laws of Kashrut from the Old Testament. These laws are detailed in the book of Leviticus, chapter 11. There, God tells the people of Israel which animals are clean and which are unclean. For example, animals that chew the cud and have cloven hooves, such as cows, sheep, and goats, may be eaten. But the pig, although it has cloven hooves, does not chew the cud, so it is forbidden. The camel is also forbidden because it chews the cud, but does not have cloven hooves. Among sea creatures, only those with fins and scales are permitted. Fish like tilapia are suitable, while shrimp or shellfish are considered unclean. Birds are also divided. Chickens or doves are allowed, but predators such as eagles are not. Why such strict rules? Scholars still debate this. Some say it was related to hygiene. Pigs, for instance, could carry diseases in the hot climate. Others believe the purpose was spiritual, to separate Israel from pagan nations and their practices. Perhaps it was both. These laws are still observed in Judaism today, influencing how people prepare and eat food, even separating meat and dairy in different meals. It's a whole system that shaped not only diet, but also the identity of the people. Now let's talk about fasting and abstinence, which are also important in the Bible. However, the approach to food changes in the New Testament. A key moment is the vision of the Apostle Peter in Acts 10:9-15. Peter sees a sheet descending from heaven full of unclean animals and hears a voice, "Rise, Peter, kill and eat." Peter objects, saying that he has never eaten anything unclean, but the voice replies, "What God has made clean, do not call common or unclean." This was a turning point. God showed that the old prohibitions were lifted, and food no longer divided people into clean and unclean. This symbolized the opening of faith to all nations, not just the Jews. Paul later wrote in Romans 14:20, "Everything is indeed clean, but it is wrong for anyone to make another stumble by what he eats." That is, food itself is neutral. What matters is how you use it. The Last Supper also unites. Bread and wine become symbols of common salvation. Thus, the New Testament transforms food from a source of division into a sign of unity, where the main thing is not what you eat, but with what faith and love you do it. Let's start with one of the most mysterious foods in the Bible, manna from heaven. The book of Exodus 16:31 says that God sent it to the Israelites in the desert when they were hungry after the exodus from Egypt. It was like coriander seed white, and the taste of it was like wafers made with honey. Every day, the people gathered this manna, and it was their food for 40 years. But what was it? The Bible describes it as a miracle, food from heaven, but scientists try to find an explanation. One theory is that it could have been the resin of the tamarisk tree, secreted by insects in the deserts of the Arabian Peninsula. It is white, sweetish, and Bedouins still collect it today under the name man. Others suggest it was a special type of lichen or even simply a symbol of God's care, defying scientific explanation. Interestingly, manna could not be stored. It spoiled overnight, except on the eve of the Sabbath, when it lasted for 2 days. This teaches us that food in the Bible is often linked to faith. Trust God every day, and He will give you everything you need. Next, we have wine, a beverage found everywhere in the Bible. One of the most striking episodes is the miracle at Cana in Galilee, described in the Gospel of John 2:1-11. At a wedding, Jesus turned water into wine, and not just any wine, but the best, as the master of the feast said, "You have kept the good wine until now?" It was about 600 liters. About 150 gallons of wine. Imagine the abundance. In those times, wine was drunk almost daily, diluted with water, because it was safer than stagnant water. But in the Bible, it is also a symbol of joy and blessing. Psalm 104:15 says, "Wine to gladden the heart of man." It was served at feasts, such as Passover, and used in rituals like the Last Supper. However, there are also warnings. Proverbs 21 says that wine is a mocker if abused. So, wine in the Bible represents a balance between pleasure and responsibility, and the miracle at Cana shows how Jesus transforms the ordinary into the extraordinary. And finally, food as a test. The first example is in the Garden of Eden, Genesis 3:6. Eve ate the forbidden fruit because it was good for food, a delight to the eyes, desirable to make one wise. This marked the beginning of the fall. Food here literally changed the fate of humanity. We don't know what fruit it was, an apple, a fig, or something else. But the point is that it became a symbol of temptation. Another instance is the temptation of Jesus in the wilderness, Matthew 4:3-4. Satan tells him, "If you are the Son of God, command these stones to become loaves of bread." Jesus replies, "Man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God." After a 40-day fast, he could have given in, but he chose the spiritual over the physical. These stories show that food in the Bible is not just nourishment, but a test. Can you resist temptation, trust God, or choose a higher purpose? This makes food not just a part of life, but a part of the spiritual path. So, we have journeyed through the amazing world of food in the Bible. We've seen that food here is much more than just a way to satisfy hunger. It is a gift from God, like manna from heaven or the fruits of the earth mentioned in Genesis. It is a symbol of faith and unity, like the bread and wine of the Last Supper. It represents rules for living, like the laws of Kashrut, and trials, like the forbidden fruit in Eden. Food in the Bible connects humans with God, reflects the culture of the time, and reminds us of spiritual truths. We even tried to imagine the recipes, from matzah to Esau's lentil pottage, and learned how simple products became part of great events. I hope this look at biblical food has inspired you to think about how food affects our lives and faith. And if you wish, try making some of these recipes at home. For example, fry fish with honey or cook lentil soup. Share in the comments how it turned out. Thank you for being with me today. It was a fascinating journey. Until next time, there's still much more interesting content ahead.